On December 5th, 2023, the presidents of 3 private universities went before Congress for a hearing titled Holding Campus Leaders Accountable and Confronting Anti-Semitism. This took place against the background of almost wall-to-wall coverage of the pro-Palestinian campus protests following the Hamas attack on Israel and Israel's subsequent war in Gaza. As a fact-finding exercise, the congressional hearing deserved a D-, but as TV, A+. Must watch. Here's Harvard's then-president Claudine Gay being questioned by Representative Elise Stefanik.
So based upon your testimony, you understand that this call for intifada is to commit genocide against the Jewish people in Israel and globally, correct?
I will say again, that type of hateful speech is personally abhorrent to me.
Do you believe that type of hateful speech is contrary to Harvard's code of conduct, or is it allowed at Harvard?
It is at odds with the values of Harvard.
Can you not say here that it is against the code of conduct at Harvard?
Within weeks, 2 of the 3 presidents at that hearing had resigned, Gay among them, and more college presidents have since quit, worn out by the demands of their increasingly trying jobs. Meanwhile, university critics are on the rise. Stefanik, Harvard class of 2006, was nominated by President-elect Trump to be the next American ambassador to the United Nations. And then there's incoming Vice President J.D. Vance.
We have to honestly and aggressively attack the universities in this country.
Like Stefanik, he knows them from the inside.
I'm an alumnus of Yale Law School at the ridiculous, thank you, boo.
The story of Harvard's leadership crisis is the subject of a new 3-part series we produced in collaboration with the Boston Globe. Ilya Meritz, our former colleague and occasional fill-in host, is the host of this series, and over the next 3 weeks, we'll investigate the forces that brought down Harvard's president and reveal the plan that the incoming administration and others have for all institutions of higher learning in America. We're calling the series The Harvard Plan. Here's Ilya.
Harvard is the oldest and richest university in America. The governing board calls itself the oldest corporation in the Western Hemisphere. If Harvard were a human being, its endowment alone would make it the 18th richest billionaire on the Forbes list. I spent a year at Harvard as a visiting journalist on a fellowship. From the moment I arrived, I kept noticing how much people at Harvard think about power, analyzing it, quantifying it, forming the people who will hold it. Just this past semester, the course catalog included more than 250 classes with the word leadership in their description. Leadership, as I eventually figured out, is Harvard speak for power. When I first got there in the fall of 2023, I'd go to the main library and roam the stacks, inhaling the scent of old books. And on my way back out, I'd pause at the top of the granite steps and look across the yard, crisscrossed by footpaths. Workers were hanging banners, building a stage for a big party. Harvard was about to inaugurate a new president. Nobody knew then that the aftermath of that celebration would be a spectacular torching of Harvard's reputation, that Harvard's own assumptions about how power works, its own blind spots, would be used against it by a bunch of Harvard grads. And then, one Friday in September, the brass band struck up a tune and the celebration began.
I think no one expected that it's going to be so rainy.
This is my friend Sonia Groisman. She's a journalist from Russia. She and I went to the inauguration together. We sat on folding chairs as it started to drizzle.
And I remember us saying something like, "Oh, it's like at Harry Potter, remember?"
It really did look like Hogwarts, with all these professors in colorful robes and mortarboard caps passing by. When Harvard's new president, Claudine Gay, swept past, I snapped a photo. I still have it on my phone. Here's a black woman with short hair and chunky glasses, smiling, waving. Her body language says, "Thank you for throwing me this party. You really shouldn't have." If her inauguration had a one-word theme, it was finally.
This community is thrilled by her historic appointment as Harvard's first Black leader and its only second women president.
Gay's parents immigrated to the United States from Haiti.
Many students felt that this moment called us to repair past harms.
One speaker after another talked about this event as historic, as a kind of correction.
Many look to our next president to guide us through this reckoning. We are lucky enough to have found that person in President Gay.
As a scholar, Gay studied Black participation in politics. Later, she became an administrator, the dean of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. So here was change, grafted onto tradition.
I invite President Emeritus Lawrence Summers to present 2 silver keys, which represent the opening of doors to knowledge and truth.
For much of the ceremony, Larry Summers, probably the most famous living former Harvard president, was sitting with his fingertips pressed together, looking grim. Now he rose to give Gay a pair of very oversized keys on a ring, and she held them up for everyone to see. There is something about this moment. It's not only the visual of a new president who looks different from her predecessors, it's also the timing. Harvard had just lost a major legal challenge to its admissions policies that went all the way to the Supreme Court. At stake, the future of race-based affirmative action.
We'll hear argument next in case 20-1199, Students for Fair Admissions versus the President and Fellows of Harvard College. Mr. Norris?
The court ruled against the university, overturning almost 5 decades of precedent. The ruling would set the guidelines not only for Harvard, but for nearly all colleges and universities.
Madam President, the chair is yours.
Thank you. And thank you for soldiering through the rain.
The theme of Gay's inaugural speech was courage. The courage to ask why not? The courage to pose the questions that lead to research breakthroughs and great insights. Without directly addressing the Supreme Court, Gay said Harvard has a commitment
to draw from a deeper pool of talent and provide our institution with the excellence it deserves and our diverse society with the leaders it needs and expects.
But what really stands out, watching it now, after everything that's happened, is that Claudine Gay's speech kind of anticipates what's to come.
We are in a moment of declining trust in institutions of all kinds, of endless access to information, but doubts and conflict about who and what to believe, of political polarization so extreme that gridlock is preferred to pragmatic collaboration.
Her read on this is pretty precise, but her ideas for rebuilding trust are hazy.
It lies partly in our courage to face our imperfections and mistakes, to turn outward with a fresh and open spirit, meeting a doubtful and restless society with audacious and uplifting ambitions, present in both the research...
It was Friday, September 29th, 2023.
President Gay, you got this.
Anything seemed possible.
And we got you.
This series is about what happened next. About the very strange, very fast sequence of events that led to the premature end of Claudine Gay's presidency and a pretty major change of direction across American institutions, the same institutions Gay worried were losing public trust. More university presidents quit. More companies backed off efforts aimed at diversity and racial reconciliation. The thing that set it all off, a letter from a group hardly anyone had heard of about a war thousands of miles away.
Imagine that you came from Mars and said, I'm trying to learn about you strange people on Earth.
Harvard law professor Noah Feldman.
And I know that on October 7th, Hamas attacked Israel. And I know that 3 months later, give or take, Claudine Gay resigned the presidency. And I know there's some connection, but what was it again? It would take a whole podcast or a whole book to try to explain it. And even then, the Martian would still say probably, gosh, you people, you're living in a very strange and complicated world.
Most of the voices you're going to hear in this series come with advanced degrees, many of them Harvard degrees. These denizens of the success factory have much in common, but this crisis divides them.
I was deeply saddened. I still am deeply saddened by it. I thought that she was mistreated.
I wanted her to be fired because of failures of leadership, failure to stop a emergence of anti-Semitism on campus.
Because of gender and race, you don't get any credits. All those credits you think you've been building up for years, the credits are always at zero.
Before I came to Harvard, I covered Donald Trump and extremism and the fraying of democratic institutions. I went to do this fellowship and go back to college to get away from all that. But it felt like those same forces followed me to the university. They became impossible to ignore. And so I got to work trying to understand what the heck just happened.
So it was over the weekend. It was Saturday night.
This is my Boston Globe colleague, Hillary Burns, who covers higher education.
I was in Vermont, not working, but obviously the news of October 7th was all over the news.
We have breaking news out of Israel this morning where Hamas has launched a surprise attack within Israel's borders overnight.
Thousands of rockets were fired into Israel as gunmen infiltrated several border towns and bases, kidnapping civilians and soldiers.
Within hours, Hillary Burns heard that a Harvard student group had put out a letter that was getting noticed.
I remember thinking people were going to be very angry about this.
The letter was written by the Harvard Undergraduate Palestine Solidarity Committee and originally co-signed by 33 other Harvard student organizations, and it blamed Israel entirely for the attack. Quote, "Today's events did not occur in a vacuum," the statement reads. For the last 2 decades, millions of Palestinians in Gaza have been forced to live in an open-air prison. In the coming days, Palestinians will be forced to bear the full brunt of Israel's violence. The apartheid regime is the only one to blame.
I knew that this issue in particular had been so divisive and contentious over the years before this. It caused a lot of rifts at Harvard in the past.
By Monday, the letter had gone viral. Some people said it was anti-Semitic.
I mean, there were members of Congress, Larry Summers, prominent alumni tweeting. It was making international headlines.
Tonight, there is growing backlash to a letter signed by nearly 36 student groups at Harvard, which solely blamed Israel.
Now executives in finance and tech want the students blacklisted. Several groups and individual students have already apologized, revoking their support of the letter.
And at that point, Monday, during the work hours, Harvard administration had not yet put out a statement at all.
Claudine Gay spent the previous night at Hillel, the Jewish student center on campus. The place was packed. Some students demanded that Harvard respond to the letter from the Undergraduate Palestine Solidarity Committee with some kind of official condemnation. Gay told them that in her view, statements don't bring healing. Showing up in person can. The next day, seeing no public statement, former Harvard president Larry Summers, the man who gave Gay the ceremonial keys to knowledge and truth, took to X to criticize the university for its silence. An official statement signed by Claudine Gay and the university's deans appeared later that day. Harvard leadership had in fact spent much of the weekend hashing out the wording. Summers responded on Bloomberg TV.
In the same way that previous leaders flew the Ukrainian flag over Harvard Yard after Putin's invasion, I thought it was appropriate for there to be a strong Harvard statement condemning in the strongest possible terms Hamas terrorism.
Harvard's statement on the Hamas attack actually came out faster than Harvard's earlier condemnations of Russia's invasion of Ukraine or the killing of George Floyd. But those letters showed passion, moral clarity. This was much more removed. Some saw it as anti-Israel for not mentioning the hostages, not using the word terrorism, and for drawing a kind of grammatical equivalence between Israel and Hamas. The following day, under pressure, Claudine Gay put out another statement aimed at diffusing the outrage. Take two is short and clear and signed only by her.
She said that that statement does not speak for Harvard. It really separated her from that student statement that had angered so many people.
If that was supposed to close the book on this episode, now trucks had started circling campus.
A digital billboard parked right outside Harvard University is attracting a lot of attention. The names and faces of Harvard students are displayed under the title Harvard's Leading Anti-Semites.
Some of the students being called out hadn't signed the letter or even known about it.
Students were really freaked out and afraid. And at that point, we were seeing alumni on Twitter, including hedge fund billionaire Bill Ackman, doubling down on this and saying, Harvard needs to release the names of students affiliated with this statement so we know on Wall Street not to hire them. Some students did lose job offers.
She called me.
Around this time, Rabbi David Wolpe received a phone call. Wolpe was a visiting scholar at Harvard's Divinity School, but before that, he led a large, diverse congregation in Los Angeles. In that role, he had to be attuned to potential disputes and balance the wishes of more liberal American-born members with those of more conservative Iranian-born congregants. BLM lawn sign, no. Gay marriages, yes. So, Rabbi Wolpe's phone was ringing. He picked up.
She said, "This is Claudine Gay." She said she realized that the campus was, exploding with this, and this was not her expertise.
More acutely than the content of the call, Wolpe remembers this.
She was clearly deeply shaken. I mean, she was very emotional on the call. She was having a hard time, and who wouldn't in her position?
Gay asked Rabbi Wolpe to join a task force in anti-Semitism. He said, yes, of course. She also asked him for a reading list.
Books that would give her both the history of the conflict and also some deeper understanding of Jewish history and why Jews feel the way they do in response to what's been going on. So I made a suggestion of a couple of books. I don't know that she ever got the time to read them, but I did make the suggestions.
It's hard to imagine now, but that October and into November, it was still possible to kind of ignore the noise. I didn't really notice any protests. The students in my classes just wanted to get ahead. Still, things were happening.
There were a couple incidents that were very high profile.
The Globe's Hillary Burns.
Including the one at the business school where there was a peaceful die-in where people were just lying on the ground holding signs calling for a ceasefire, and a student walked through the crowd, like filming students, and some kind of altercation happened.
In this video, which was posted online, a person who has been identified as an Israeli student is kind of mobbed by a big group of people holding up keffiyehs, shouting what sounds like, shame.
We don't really know what to make of what happened. The prosecution of 2 pro-Palestinian graduate students who were charged with assault and battery and a civil rights violation is still playing out in the courts.
For some Harvard alumni, this incident and others were a tipping point. What is the Mark connection? You guys were friends at Harvard or what?
We were, friends would be overstatement. We knew each other.
Sam Lessin, class of 2005, is a tech executive who's worked at Facebook. He was at Harvard at the same time as Mark Zuckerberg, who did not graduate.
We knew each other in college. We became close years later.
Lessin had been hearing murmurs about bad things happening at Harvard for a while, but he didn't buy it.
I started hearing, like everyone else, so the trigger warnings, and then I'm like, wow, there are trigger warnings? Like, we talked about some crazy stuff. And so you kind of get a sense that things are changing here or there. People worry about anti-Semitism. They worry about what can and can't be said. What does and doesn't happen on campus, disinvited speakers. You kind of see this drumbeat. But again, I, pre-10/7 and last fall, really was the one who defended the university pretty consistently in my friend group, being like, yep, look, this stuff is complicated.
Lessin had given hundreds of thousands of dollars to Harvard in the past, but now he was questioning that.
And I'm like, oh my God, I'm the one who's wrong here, and that sucks.
I went up to campus and I met with hundreds of students in small groups and larger groups. And they're like, Bill, why is the president doing nothing? Why is the administration doing nothing? And that was really the beginning.
This is tape from the Lex Friedman podcast. The guest is Bill Ackman, Harvard College class of 88, MBA 1992, who'd given Harvard millions. He was on his own parallel journey. Ackman is a wildly successful hedge fund manager known for picking big public fights with companies he thinks are mismanaged. He once successfully browbeat Wendy's into selling off the Tim Hortons chain of donut shops. Reaching out to Harvard's leadership,
it reminded me of like early days of activism, where I couldn't get the CEO of Wendy's to return my call. I couldn't get the CEO of Harvard, to take a meeting.
Bill Ackman bailed on an interview with us last minute. Like Sam Lessin, he experienced a kind of awakening about Harvard.
They started talking to me about this oppressor-oppressed framework. I had not even heard of this. Basically, they're like, look, Israel is deemed an oppressor, and the Palestinians are deemed the oppressed.
Many of Harvard's critics once considered themselves liberal or center-left, but the crisis at Harvard worked like a wedge. You could see it prying off a segment of rich and influential supporters in real time. The story was reaching critical mass, and Congress got interested, specifically the Republican-controlled House Committee on Education and the Workforce. Near the end of November, Claudine Gay and 2 other college presidents agreed to testify in a hearing on anti-Semitism at colleges. Rabbi Wolpe, the guy who sent Gay the reading list, he texted her with an offer.
I knew that she was going into the hearings, and I thought I could help. And so I tried to persuade her to let me supply her with quotes from the Bible or the Talmud or the Jewish sages, something that would show that she was taking this seriously.
Wolpe wanted Gay to succeed, but he had serious doubts about how Harvard was responding to the crisis. He had joined the advisory group on anti-Semitism, which brought him face-to-face with a number of university leaders. Where Wolpe saw a 5-alarm fire, he says Harvard just didn't.
I don't want to speak specifically for President Gay, but I mean, it was from everything that we heard, some of it official, some of it unofficial. The corporation, which is the board that oversees Harvard, the deans, everybody thought that it was going to eventually peter out and go away, in part because they saw, which was true, that many students were not involved and didn't care and just came to class and so on. And I don't think they realized that for the students who were involved, this was an epical event.
Still, Wolpe thought Gay would be well served to quote from a holy book when she went before Congress, to show she was simpatico with the Jewish people and attuned to Jewish suffering. Did you have a specific quotation, citation in mind?
I think I had a couple that I thought of, but I don't really remember now what they were. But it's easy to find, relevant citations for peaceful, interaction, for learned debate or whatever. I don't know what I would have come up with.
What did she say?
She thanked me very much.
She said, thank you for the suggestion, and that's it.
Yeah, basically.
During these difficult days, I have felt the bonds of our community strain. In response, I have sought to confront hate while preserving free expression. This is difficult work, and I know that I have not always gotten it right.
When the day comes and the C-SPAN camera is on her, Gay does not cite the Torah or the Talmud. She talks like the administrator she is.
We at Harvard reject anti-Semitism and denounce any trace of it on our campus or within our community. Anti-Semitism is a symptom of ignorance, and the cure for ignorance is knowledge. Harvard must model what it means to preserve free expression while combating prejudice and preserving the security of our community.
For a hearing in which members profess to be alarmed about rising anti-Semitism, there is shockingly little fact-finding. Hatred of Jews is construed broadly to include contested terms like intifada. Members of Congress don't want to hear about the fine points of balancing free expression with the need for public safety. For the 3 college presidents, it's a ritual beating lasting more than 5 hours.
Dr. Kornbluth, at MIT, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate MIT's code of conduct or rules regarding bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
If there's one part of this story that is probably very familiar to you, it's the barrage of confrontational questions from New York Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, Harvard College class of 2006, currently President-elect Trump's nominee for ambassador to the United Nations.
Ms. McGill, at Penn, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Penn's rules or code of conduct? Yes or no?
If the speech turns into conduct, it can be harassment. Yes.
I am asking specifically calling for the genocide of Jews. Does that constitute bullying or harassment?
If it is directed and severe or pervasive, it is harassment.
So the answer is yes.
It is a context-dependent decision, Congresswoman.
It's a context-dependent decision. That's your testimony today. Calling for the genocide of Jews is depending upon the context. And Dr. Gay, at Harvard, Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules of bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
It can be, depending on the context.
What's the context?
Targeted as an individual, at an individual.
It's targeted at Jewish students, Jewish individuals. Do you understand your testimony is dehumanizing them? Do you understand that dehumanization is part of anti-Semitism? I will ask you one more time. Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules of bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
I was in the barber chair, if you will, getting a haircut.
Bill Ackman, remember, the hedge fund guy, class of 88, was watching and multitasking.
And I had a guy on my team send me the 3-minute section. I said, cut that line of questioning. And I put out a little tweet on that. And I call it my greatest hits of posts. It's got something like 110 million views. And everyone looked at this and said, what is wrong with, university campuses?
Rabbi Wolpe was watching too, and he too had a tweet. Before he hit send, he called Claudine Gay to let her know he had decided to quit Harvard's anti-Semitism advisory group. Then he shared the letter on social. It happened to be the start of that year's Festival of Lights.
Resigning, a Hanukkah message.
This tweet also went viral. Rabbi Wolpe read the letter to me.
I believe Claudine Gay to be both a kind and thoughtful person. Most of the students here wish only to get an education and a job, not prosecute ideological agendas.
But
the system at Harvard, along with the ideology that grips far too many of the students and faculty, the ideology that works only along axes of oppression and places Jews as oppressors, and therefore intrinsically evil, is itself evil. Ignoring Jewish suffering is evil.
Claudine Gay declined my invitation to do an interview. I ended up spending a lot of time talking with a different college president.
Hi, I'm Danielle Holley. Last name is Holley. I'm the 20th president of Mount Holyoke College.
Like Claudine Gay, Holley is a Black woman who attended Harvard in the late 1990s. Gay got a PhD, Holley went to the law school. And they have something else in common. They were both new on the job last year.
I started on July 1st, 2023, the same day as Claudine Gay started.
Holley watched the hearings with a growing sense of disbelief. All three presidents, like her, were at the beginning of their tenures. And yet,
they were being accused of basically creating an atmosphere of hatred inside of universities that they had not led for years. So how could either one of them be responsible, right?
And there was something in the particular discourse around Claudine Gay that felt familiar. Holley says the scrutiny is intense if you're a Black woman and a first.
The jury is always out, right? There's a sense that even though you hold that position, that it's really not yours. You are temporarily holding the reins, but you're still an outsider.
Danielle Holley and Claudine Gay didn't really know each other. They'd met once on the sidelines of a 1-week summer camp that Harvard runs for new college presidents. I know, I had no idea. What's really interesting is that this seminar included an almost 2-hour session on handling the kind of out-of-nowhere crises that can undermine a new president.
Crisis management, of course, in the summer of 2023 was mostly COVID related. We were thinking about what happens with the next pandemic, but we did not spend a lot of time thinking about kind of what happens in a crisis of the kind that we had over the last year in higher ed.
An emotionally fraught, social media-fueled bleep storm where donors are in revolt and public statements are everything just wasn't on the radar. When that actually happened, Holley took an approach that was totally different from Harvard's. She refused to say anything publicly, except to release a letter.
It's now become known around here, we call it the statement on statements.
The letter explained that although past presidents of Mount Holyoke had weighed in on big issues of the day, starting now, the school would only speak on subjects that directly concerned it. This had been Holley's own policy for a decade, going back to her previous job as dean of the law school at Howard, a historically Black university.
I came to Howard July 1st of 2014, which was only a few weeks before Michael Brown was killed in Ferguson. Immediately, people said, well, are you going to issue a statement on behalf of the law school about the killing of Michael Brown? I said, no, I'm not going to do that because my duty is to educate lawyers who will then turn around and make real transformation in the criminal law system. So I don't have time to write or do what I considered at the time to be performative statements.
Like at Howard Law School, Holly's no statements rule at Mount Holyoke made some people angry. Students accused her of condoning genocide through her silence. There were complaints from alumni.
If donors were not upset and didn't threaten to take money away, that would be a surprise. I think the question is, how do you react?
What I learned from Danielle Hawley is that when you're a new president, you don't get a lot of grace. The donors may not know you or trust you. It's a fragile time, and you need the board to show a united front with its chosen president. For Hawley, it's like, bear with me here.
We are going to manage this crisis in a certain way. When we come out on the other side of the crisis, I will come visit you and talk to you about not what happened this week, not what happened this month, but what happened over the course of a year or what happened over the course of 18 months. But that's easier to say when you're an experienced president.
Claudine Gay was 5 months into the job when she went before Congress. She and the other two presidents gave almost identical answers on the question of whether a call for genocide violated university speech codes. That moment echoed across social media, open to wild interpretation. And now, their jobs were at stake. 2 days after the hearing, the MIT board put out a letter of support full of praise for its president, Sally Kornbluth. She's still in the job today. At the University of Pennsylvania, it was clear that the board was done with President Liz Magill. She resigned.
The world should know that Liz Magill is a very good person and a talented leader who was beloved by her team. She is not the slightest bit anti-Semitic.
This is Scott Bach. He was chair of the board of trustees at UPenn. He resigned that position right after Liz Magill and made this letter public.
Working with her was one of the great pleasures of my life. Worn down by months of relentless external attack, she was not herself last Tuesday. Over-prepared and over-lawyered given the hostile forum and high stakes, she provided a legalistic answer to a moral question, and that was wrong. It made for a dreadful 30-second soundbite in what was more than 5 hours of testimony. I wish Liz well in her future endeavors. I believe that in the fullness of time, people will come to view the story of her presidency at Penn very differently.
As for Harvard, the board was initially silent. Claudine Gay seemed to be alone. She apologized in the pages of the Harvard Crimson. I am sorry, she said. Words matter. It wasn't totally clear what she was apologizing for, though. She had been guided to give legally meticulous answers. The advice came from a trusted Harvard insider, Bill Lee, Harvard College class of '72. Lee is a partner at a major law firm and a former leader of the Harvard Corporation. He represented Harvard in the big affirmative action case it had just lost at the Supreme Court. As the crisis deepened, the Harvard Corporation increasingly turned to him. One person told me he was like a field general. It's possible that someone else, a fresh, outside voice, would have counseled Gay differently. Rabbi Wolpe, remember, he was the one who suggested Gay quote from the Jewish sages. He was disappointed by the lack of passion she showed. A law professor told me Gay could have given the answers Congress wanted to hear and then amended her testimony later for the record. But that's not what happened. Bill Lee declined our requests for comment. So did the current first fellow of the Harvard Corporation, Penny Pritzker, class of 1981, who led the group that hired Gay. After the hearing, a full week passed before the Harvard Corporation made a statement in support of Claudine Gay. But by then, a new crisis was upon them.
I just think it is newsworthy that the president of the most famous university in the world plagiarized.
The university says Claudine Gay has now asked that corrections be made to her 1997 dissertation because of what it called inadequate citations.
Harvard is committed to DEI, and Claudine Gay's race protected her from losing her job. It's outrageous.
That's next time.